Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Hello, education lovers. Welcome to Big Ideas in Education. I'm Ryan Kairalla. Joining us on the program this week is Marshall Simmonds, the Vice President of Sales for Scribbles Software, a leading provider of K-12 software solutions for document management, records processing, enrollment, and lottery management. Recently, Scribbles Software updated its ScribOnline document management system to help schools convert potentially decades' worth of staff, student, and alumni records to the cloud. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting scribsoft.com. Marshall, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thanks so much for having me, Ryan. It's great to be here.
It is great to be chatting with you. I got to say, I was just before this interview, I was talking with some education stakeholders about this very topic. I told them I was about to interview somebody who works in the document management space for K-12. And I think the first thing I heard from them was just, can you give me their contact information, please? Because we're having some document management challenges over here. And I know that person I was talking to is not alone in that regard. That is a huge challenge for schools, especially the ones that have been around for a long time, have boxes full of paper documents. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that schools are facing when it comes to document management?
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to. And you have to give me their number. We'd be happy to help.
Good to know. Yeah, they're really struggling.
not alone in that challenge. But no, I think the document management, and really it's a paper management problem in a lot of ways, is one that, people don't necessarily think about the burden it places on educational institutions in the United States. But B, I think, they oftentimes don't contextualize the problem well, right, either. So if you think about the nub of the issue, you essentially have institutions that serve as a source of record, right? Our K-12 institutions in the U.S., and it varies a little bit by state, but ultimately have these really, really, serious record retention policies that they're required to adhere to. So it'll vary by, document type, but a lot of times in the case of the student record, which is oftentimes the longest retained, depending on the state, the school district may have to store and keep a copy of that record or that student transcript at a minimum, often, for an undisclosed or an unending period of time, right? Yeah. In a lot of cases, retention is infinite. And so if you think about, that problem on the face of it, just student records, you have an exponentially growing problem with budgets and resources that are not exponentially growing alongside it, right? And I think it's additionally compounded, especially, this records management issue, where a lot of these documents, whether they're, staff documents or, like HR records or student records, they have a tremendous amount of highly sensitive, personally identifiable information on them as well, right? So if you think, great example of this is the student cumulative folder, that manila folder that, follows the student from school to school as they go through a district. That's got some really, really sensitive information. It's got things like birth certificate and social security number. And, there could be individual, education plans in there, medical records, right? Just really, really rich, personally identifiable information that's very heavily protected and regulated against.
Yeah. And it's only gotten, I would say, in the last few years, more regulated and more stringent in terms of the record keeping and privacy obligations of K-12 schools. So not only is the number of records going up with each year, with each new group of students that are being brought in and graduated, but the obligations and the bureaucracy and the requirements that you have to adhere to with these retained documents are only becoming more significant for schools.
Absolutely. And I mean, this student record is a great example of this. There's an increase on attention to security, but you have one paper copy of a record and probably, 30 or 40 different documents in that record that not everyone that has access to that cumulative folder needs to see. right? So
Mm-hmm.
you could have a teacher who needs access to one thing, but shouldn't have access to another thing. It's really hard to manage that if you're in a paper copy, but it's also a really needed record to be accessed. And so, a lot of times you see this scenario where it's in a secure room and a student or a staff member can't take that file out of the room, which really inhibits their ability to do their job on behalf of, the student. And so you just have these horror stories where it's like someone left the records room unlocked one night, or, someone took the record home with them and lost it in a car, right? And so this whole document management concept is really ultimately one about doing things that a school or a district is required to do in a really secure and efficient manner, i.e. both from a staff management, but also just a budgetary perspective. And then it's also this access component, right? Paper is a lot less accessible than, digital documents. And so, being able to manage the security and the access around those are the challenges we really like to think we're solving on behalf of our customers when it comes to a document management, perspective.
And obviously, cloud storage is a necessity when it comes to modern document management. Now, in that regard, I'm going to ask you what I would probably have to admit is a stupid question. But as we know in education, there are no stupid questions, right?
Absolutely.
So there are no shortage of commercially available cloud-based document storage platforms out there. I use them, you use them. What is the problem with utilizing those kind of platforms for document storage and document management, specifically in the K-12 setting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think what's necessarily wrong with those things, sometimes what you find, and again, this is a little bit state by state based, is they don't actually meet the requirements for what is an acceptable document management system.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of states have some type of requirement around like, hey, you have to have, the ability to set different levels of access, right? That can be kind of hard and complex to manage in, something like a SharePoint or a Google Drive. Those are also just really difficult to manage on an enterprise level, right? When you think about the different document management needs of a school district, they probably need the ability to manage different department documents, different classes of documents, different levels of access and retention rules that are associated with that. So, ultimately having an out-of-the-box solution that is purpose-built for the needs and requirements of a K through 12 school district or school, really, really important. And I think that's something that Scribbles does. The other thing I would say that makes us a little bit unique is that, our value proposition is that from point of entry through enrollment or application, all the way through, matriculation, we create a digital footprint for that student. So, that shows up in things like our online enrollment application integrates with our electronic student cumulative folder, so that as students are enrolling, they automatically have a cumulative folder created and have the documents that they went through and needed to add as part of that enrollment process added, automatically to it, right? The other thing I think about is our online records request platform integrates with our online document management solution, which is pretty unique, right? There's no providers that do document management and document request and have an integrated platform to provide that.
And it would definitely make a lot of sense for schools to have those two platforms integrated and talking to each other, so nothing gets lost in translation. That makes a lot of sense to me. And so ScribOnline is trying to create or I should say, has created a document management solution that is specifically geared toward the legal, compliance, and operational needs of K-12. And it's a platform that you have made additional augmentations to lately. Can you tell the viewers and listeners a bit more about the new updates that have been made to ScribOnline?
Yeah, absolutely. So ScribOnline's been, one of our oldest, probably most mature products, right? It's, been around for over 10 years. And so I think it was very much in need of sort of large scale innovation and enhancements, to keep up with the sort of market of document management solutions. But there's really three, key enhancements that I'd highlight with it. The first is it's much more user-friendly from a user experience and interface perspective, right? I think if you looked at our legacy version, it was starting to look a little bit legacy. And so, having the just newer sort of ability to provide a more enhanced user experience, things like, mobilely responsive design, just a cleaner look and feel, easier access to, point and shoot on buttonology, all that stuff, I think really enhanced in the UX. And then, the second thing I would say about it is it's really built to leverage our Amazon Web Service environment. So, built on that platform specifically for, AWS, and that allows us just to get greater speed and efficiency out of the document management solution. So reducing, load times, search times, all that good stuff. And then, lastly, because it's newer technology, we've got a little bit, more exciting and accessible features. So the ability to save and index documents from within the application. That's something that's new and available to our customers, knowing they're going to have one-off needs to add documents into ScribOnline rather than, via mass digitization efforts. So, again, all things being equal, really, really exciting set of value enhancing features we're pushing to customers.
Is there a particular feature or use case that's a little bit unique within ScribOnline that maybe a K-12 stakeholder wouldn't immediately think of in a document management platform, but when you tell them about it, they go, "Oh, that's something I would use all the time. That's really cool."
Yeah. I hate to say it. I'm not sure there necessarily is, just because document management is relatively straightforward. I think the biggest unique piece, right, is we're an out-of-the-box solution. And so probably the most unique piece is that, I think a lot of times when customers think about an implementation for something like document management, they're thinking about taking a, commercially unspecific document management solution, right? Same document management platform that a law office would use or a manufacturer would use, right? And they're spending a lot of time up front, configuring workflows and how staff access is going to be managed and this and that. And so the really unique use case for us is, we can get up and running with a lot less effort on both our staff and the staff at a customer site, because again, we purpose built, things like workflows to be specific to K-12 districts. So it just goes a lot quicker and easier from an implementation and then sort of day-to-day usage perspective.
That's music to my ears. So much software that K-12 stakeholders have to use on a regular basis it's a lot of square peg round hole technology where you have to take stuff that's probably used more in other industries and try to make it fit into your education setting. And as you just noted, that sort of thing requires a lot of time and resources on the implementation side, and what you wind up with never really fits what you need in school. So I love seeing platforms like yours and companies like yours that center K-12 education as its customer base and focus on product market fit in the K-12 space. Really, really great to see. Have you heard stakeholder feedback lately on some of these new features that have made you pretty happy with what you're seeing built so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about, some of our customer testimonials where, customers have literally taken 80, 90, hundreds of years worth of paper documents, fully digitized them, and are now managing the entirety of their district's, student HR records in a digital fashion using ScribOnline. And I think, that's a real testament to the system's usability. But again, I think it's also a real testament to the fact that, in partnership with our customers, we're making these projects that, at one point felt unattainable and impossible to tackle, really achievable for our customers.
Gosh, that's really cool. Our guest has been Marshall Simmonds, the Vice President of Sales for Scribbles Software. Find out more about his work and about the new ScribOnline augmentations by visiting scribsoft.com. Marshall, before we let you go, we got one last question for you. If with the snap of your fingers, you could make one change to the education system, what change would it be?
That's a great question, Ryan. I think the biggest change that I would make is one of perspective, maybe, right? And that change would be that the educational system really begins to understand and prioritize how it can make access more equitable, right? And when I talk about that, what I mean is, I think one of the core beliefs that we have at Scribbles is that paper and access to paper processes is inherently inequitable, right? And that if you look at the market data, the more socioeconomic means increase, so does a family's access or ability to access paper, right? Things like a printer, a checkbook, having the ability to take time off work if I don't have a printer to go print something out, right? Bottom line is the families that need access the most and to whom these educational opportunities will be most life-changing are the ones that have the hardest time accessing those opportunities if they are paper-based. And so I think the thing that I would change for the educational system is really to put that idea front and center in its mind as it's thinking about, how it ultimately serves its constituents, because that is what public education is at the end of the day. It is a service that is provided to constituents, right? And so having, equity and the ability to access those opportunities as sort of the forefront guiding light in everything they do, I think is the thing that I would snap my fingers and change.
That is really powerful perspective. I feel like we could have a whole other interview just on the socioeconomic implications of paper, and it would be some really cool high-level stuff. Marshall, it's been a real pleasure having you this week. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Same, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
And thank you all for checking out Big Ideas in Education. We'll see you next week.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.